We all carry small weaknesses, habits that bind us without us even realizing it. They are daily practices, so routine that we barely notice their impact on our lives. But what if these habits, little by little, were limiting our ability to live a full and meaningful life? Think about it. How many times have you found yourself repeating an action without even understanding why? This can be anything from something seemingly harmless, like opening social media to kill time, to something more intense, like relying on small daily indulgences to find relief. This video will be an invitation to analyze these habits, understand their roots, and explore a way to overcome them, finding an inner strength that we may not even know we have. Here, Stoic philosophy enters like a light in the midst of darkness, offering us a way to understand and face these vices, proposing a path of life focused on principles, self-control, and the search for virtue. Stoicism, a philosophy founded more than 2,000 years ago, teaches us that happiness is not in circumstances, but in the way we deal with them. For the Stoics, no matter who you are, where you are, or what you possess, everyone can, and should, seek to live with virtue and self-control. Epictetus, for example, lived much of his life as a slave and yet found in Stoic philosophy a way to achieve inner freedom. Marcus Aurelius, on the other hand, was an emperor and faced the temptation of excesses, but he chose the path of moderation, self-control, and moral responsibility. These stories show us that Stoicism is a universal philosophy, one that transcends time and social barriers. What these philosophers tell us is that there is a path we can walk, a life we can build, a life that frees us from addictions and brings us closer to true peace of mind. Before we continue, if you like content like this, don't forget to subscribe and leave the like. This way you stay on top of all the content of personal development and Stoicism. Virtue is, for the Stoics, the most precious asset we can cultivate. But what, after all, is this virtue that is so much talked about? It is a life lived with moral excellence, with solid values and a firm character. In a world where we are constantly drawn to momentary pleasures and quick indulgences, virtue offers us a path of resistance. This path is not the easiest. In fact, it requires us to renounce comforts and immediate satisfaction. But it is a path that gives us strength, that makes us stronger. Marcus Aurelius, as emperor, could easily have yielded to all the temptations that power offered him. He had the right to indulge in luxuries, to accumulate wealth, to exercise his will without being questioned. However, he chose to live a life focused on self-control, character development, and the pursuit of virtue. For him, virtue was not just an abstract idea, but rather the basis of a meaningful life. He understood that true power is not in giving into impulses, but in mastering them. In his writings, Marcus Aurelius often spoke about the value of a disciplined mind, about the importance of doing what is right, even when no one is looking. Virtue is this: it is having the courage to be true to oneself, even when the path is difficult. The Stoics developed a practical and extremely powerful approach to dealing with human suffering, the dichotomy of control. This approach teaches us that there are things that are under our control, such as our thoughts, our attitudes, and our reactions, and things that are not, such as the actions of others, external circumstances, and the unpredictable events of life. How often do we spend energy trying to control what's out of our reach? Perhaps the root of much of our suffering lies precisely in this futile attempt to control the uncontrollable. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic masters, taught that peace of mind comes from the ability to accept what we cannot change and focus our attention on what we can really influence. This teaching seems simple, but it is of enormous depth. Imagine the relief we feel when we let go of the need to control the world around us and focus only on what is truly ours. When you internalize this idea, the world becomes lighter, because you realize that peace does not depend on external circumstances, but on how you decide to deal with them. We can't change the wind, but we can adjust the sails. This is the secret of serenity. There are addictions that we all recognize as dangerous: excessive alcohol use, drug use, gambling addiction. But what about the more subtle vices, those that are part of our routine and that, therefore, go unnoticed? You may have never stopped to think about it, but these harmless addictions can be just as harmful as the more obvious addictions. Consider, for example, the habit of compulsively scrolling through social media. At first, this may seem harmless. We are just following the news, seeing what the people around us are doing. But, over time, this practice turns into a constant comparison, a need for validation. We begin to measure the value of our life based on the perfect lives we see on screens. Every like, every comment, every notification activates a reward mechanism in our brain, and soon we're stuck in a cycle of incessant search for external validation. And this does not only occur on social networks. Small actions, such as the habit of procrastinating, the need to always be busy to avoid facing one's thoughts, or even the constant consumption of novelty and entertainment, can be silent addictions that limit our ability to live fully. These vices are like small anchors that tie us to the port, that prevent us from exploring the open sea. We need to be vigilant. We need to look inside and ask ourselves, what are the addictions that are limiting me? Identifying these habits is the first step towards a freer and more authentic life. Self-discipline is the foundation on which all Stoic philosophy is built. It is the ability to say no to momentary impulses that do not serve our long-term goals and yes to actions that actually contribute to our growth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Dig within yourself, it is there that the source of good is." He knew that true strength comes not from giving in to desires, but from learning to control them. Often, the word discipline is scary. It seems like something rigid, something that limits our freedom. But in fact, discipline is the path to true freedom. Imagine living a life where you have control over your wills, where you are no longer a slave to your impulses. That's the promise of self-discipline, a life where every decision is made with purpose and intention, a life where you're the master of yourself. Self-discipline is not something that is achieved overnight. It is built little by little, with small choices, with small no's that, added together, strengthen us. It's like exercising a muscle. With each workout, it becomes stronger, more resistant. And so is self-discipline, a constant training, which prepares us to face life's challenges with serenity and firmness. Identifying our vices is an exercise in honesty. And that's not easy. It's uncomfortable to look inside and see the habits that weaken us, the patterns we repeat without question. But this is an essential step in the Stoic journey. Grab a piece of paper and make a list of your vices. Ask yourself, what good does this habit really bring me? And what damage does it cause? Divide your analysis into two columns. On the one hand, the illusory benefits that you believe this addiction brings, and on the other, the harmful consequences that it actually causes. This exercise can be revealing. Often, we realize that the small pleasures we seek do not compare to the damage that these addictions bring us. And when we do this analysis, we realize that the freedom we seek can only be found by freeing ourselves from these habits. Changing habits is one of the biggest challenges we can face, but it is a challenge that is worth every effort. Creating new routines is one of the most powerful strategies to break the vicious cycle. If you smoke after meals, for example, try going for a walk, reading a book, or practicing meditation. Each new routine we create strengthens our resolve and takes us away from the old habits we want to leave behind. Over time, these new habits stop being an effort and become part of our life. It is constancy that builds true character. Every small choice counts, every small change brings us closer to who we really want to be. The Stoics believe that virtue is the supreme good. It is the goal that gives us direction and purpose. The search for virtue is not easy. It requires renunciation, discipline, and courage. However, this search brings a deep satisfaction, a peace that cannot be found in fleeting pleasures. Virtue is the beacon that lights our path, the force that guides us when everything around us seems uncertain. When we live according to virtue, we are not only seeking the good, we are also building a life of meaning and integrity. For Marcus Aurelius, virtue was the core of his entire philosophy and the secret to true inner peace. By practicing virtue, he stood firm in his convictions and found the strength to lead with wisdom and balance. It reminds us that living with integrity is living without regrets. It means acting with kindness, justice, courage, and wisdom, even when the world seems to push us in opposite directions. Every decision aligned with virtue brings us a sense of accomplishment, a certainty that we are following the right path. It doesn't matter if we are facing criticism, obstacles, or temptations. When we choose virtue, we choose a life of peace with oneself and harmony with the world. This is the true power of virtue. It gives us purpose and connects us with what really matters. Responsibility is one of the most fundamental tenets of Stoicism. For the Stoics, taking responsibility means acknowledging that we are authors of our own lives. Every choice, every action we take defines who we are and what we build. There is no point in blaming circumstances, the people around us, or even fate. Responsibility is the key that empowers us and frees us from the posture of victimhood. When we accept responsibility, we realize that even in the face of hardship, we always have a choice. We can choose how to respond to adversity, how to deal with our own addictions and weaknesses. This posture gives us strength, transforms us into protagonists of our own history. Marcus Aurelius, who had absolute power over the largest empire in the world, knew that his greatest responsibility was to himself. He understood that by controlling his own actions and reactions, he could rule wisely and righteously. By taking responsibility, we free ourselves from the shackles of victimization. We realize that we are the ones who shape our destiny and that each decision brings us closer or further away from the person we want to be. Responsibility is the bridge that takes us from apathy to action, from conformism to growth. Stoicism teaches that self-reliance is a state of mind that allows us to find peace and strength within ourselves, without relying on the recognition, approval, or validation of others. Self-reliance does not mean isolation, rather, it means developing an inner strength that allows us to live according to our own values, without needing the world around us to validate our choices. In Stoic practice, this self-sufficiency is built gradually. Every time we resist an impulse that takes us away from our goals, every time we choose self-control over indulgence, we strengthen our emotional independence. This does not mean that we will never need support or help, but rather that we are becoming more resilient and prepared to deal with adversity. As Epictetus said, the real power lies in knowing that, regardless of what happens outside, we have the power to keep our peace. This journey does not require perfection, but rather a constant commitment to one's own growth. Along the way, we will face mistakes and falls, but each of these moments is an opportunity to learn, to start over. Self-reliance is a daily exercise, a practice that leads us to trust more in our own ability to face challenges. Over time, we become stronger and wiser, and this gives us the freedom to live more lightly and purposefully. True freedom lies not in external circumstances, but in the ability to live according to our values. When we choose virtue, self-discipline, and self-control, we break free from the chains of addiction and become masters of our own life. Stoicism teaches us that peace and happiness do not depend on what we have, but on who we choose to be. If you've ever experienced the satisfaction of resisting a destructive impulse, you know what we're talking about. That's the power of Stoicism in practice, a philosophy that teaches us to find true freedom within ourselves. The journey is long, and often difficult, but it is the journey that transforms us, that shapes us. When we understand that the true power is in our hands, that we are the masters of our destiny, then we are ready to live a life of purpose, peace, and true freedom. Now I'm going to leave 2 more videos on the screen that can help you in other areas of your life. I'll wait for you there.